Welcome to the SmartTechCheck podcast, hosted by Mark Vena, your home for candid, insightful, and provocative conversations about the smart home, home automation, security, smartphones, PC and console gaming, and much more.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Vena, host of the SmartTechCheck podcast. Today is Wednesday, October 20th, 2021. Joining me for today's podcast is I'm not going to say trio, my duo of stalwart tech journalists. I used that phrase last week because I just love the sound of that word, stalwart. Journalist Rob Pegoraro, who writes for Wirecutter, The Verge, and USA Today. John Quain, who writes for the New York Times, Smart Cities, and Tom Guide. And we do not know where Stewart Wolpin is. So if you know where Stewart Wolpin is, please send something out on Twitter, and we will send out a search party for him. But he's always welcome to the podcast when he remembers when the podcast is being conducted. So that's an entirely different deal. Gentlemen, how are you? And good afternoon, because I know you guys are on the East Coast. And how are each of you?
Very good, thanks.
Today's
fun 2 days watching ads, by what you mean product launch events that you can't actually attend.
Well, today's podcast is purely focused on Unleashed. I love that. It's funny how when Apple teases the name of the event, literally days before one of these Apple events, how everybody tries to read something into it. What's the secret behind each syllable, each word? And I don't know. I mean, now they're becoming a bit routine, in my view. I think that's kind of interesting, but. John, we were talking before the recording started. You didn't watch it, which is not good. And I will mention that to Tim Cook that you didn't take an hour out of your freaking day to watch it. Rob, but I know you've read up all the summaries in quite a bit, so you're familiar with everything. Right. What about you, Rob? Did you get a chance to watch the entire broadcast?
I did, yes. I actually was finishing up my lunch as I was watching it on my iPad, my now obsolete iPad Mini 5. And yeah, interesting in that it was started with all this really consumer, by which I mean people without a huge shopping budget for technology products, new AirPods, the Apple Music. And then we pivoted to these really expensive laptops that, if you are out there, you've been thinking of a MacBook Air, you can ignore everything Apple announced because it's not for you. These are $2,000 and up laptops for people who use them because they live in applications like Photoshop or whatever the heck image editors use these days, Final Cut Pro, whatever. I don't use these things.
Right. Well, no, I think you're right. I mean, we're going to get into all this in a second, but the thing that kind of struck me was kind of interesting. They opened up. I wrote a Forbes piece this morning that I kind of opined. It reminded me of a kind of a Frank Sinatra concert from the late '80s, where generally he had in the good old days, Frank had very good opening acts, but toward the end they were getting a little bit thin. And I think I saw it with Edie Gourmet and Steve. What was his name? Edie Gourmet,
I would have said a U2 concert in the late 1980s.
And their time had passed many years before, and I'm all waiting for Frank to show up, even though Frank needed a teleprompter at that point, to sing My Way. But until they got to the Apple Silicon piece and the MacBook piece, I mean, the first 25 minutes was for me, pretty, they were press release savvy, worthy, I should say. I mean, I don't think you need to tell the world on a virtual announcement like that we're coming out with the HOMEPOD minis in 3 colors. I just think that was a little bit overkill. But anyway, let me bring up the opening slide. I want to talk about the Apple Music voice plan. We'll get into that. We're going to talk about the mini models. We won't spend a lot of time on that, but then we'll jump into pods. The meat of the announcement, which I think was the Pro and the Max iterations of M1. And then the new MacBook Pro models, which I think the number of different changes, I think that will be delightful to people that were made outside the silicon issues. But I think that kind of represents the bulk of the things I want to dig into. So without any further ado, and I want to get your opinion first. The Apple voice plan, it sounded like a cell phone plan, by the way, just a name. It's
right. Actually, why would you? I mean, I get product segmentation, but
go ahead.
On the interface, like my comment on Twitter was, Obviously, the next thing is going to be the $2.99 a month terminal plan, where you can only select songs, create playlists by opening up the terminal app on a Mac and using the Unix command line. Like, maybe you could just find some other way, change up your subscription bundles. This seems like a really weird way to make your service seem cheaper. Although I did see somebody suggest perhaps if enough people sign up for this and opt into, Siri analytics, Siri will be less terrible at understanding what we say.
Yeah.
Well, it also seems like right for an SNL sketch here. I mean, you could just hear people asking for songs and saying, "No, I don't want Rick Astley." Getting the wrong song. Getting Rick James every time. I mean, this is not a good way.
That exact thought, John, popped in my head. Is they'll come out with a $2.99 plan for people who only want to listen to Broadway show music, which I probably would sign up to. But anyway, I think what they're trying, to me, it's a Spotify play, obviously, to try to extend their spectrum, their price band spectrum, into the lower end part of the market. But I wasn't really. It didn't really, blow me over. To me, it's really comparable to what Apple's done on a slightly different scale when Apple announced the SE, the iPhone SE a few years ago, which was an entry-level phone, and there was this fear, well, is that going to cannibalize their high end, which it really didn't. So I'm not really sure they care about. I think most people who step up to the voice plan are people who are going to be very young. I mean, someone who can swing $4.99 a month, which presumably some young people can. Maybe not all young people, but some young people can. But it's got some restrictions and limitations. I think that doesn't make it particularly appealing, in my view. Right, Rob?
Yeah, like I looked at it like, no, if I decide I want to sign up for Apple Music, I will actually want to be able to use more than one interface and not just be stuck on Apple devices. Since, of course, I have an Android phone, I have a Windows laptop to my right. Saving $5 a month, I can find other ways to save $5 a month. Like I could buy less crap the next time I'm at Whole Foods, for example.
Yeah, I mean, this is just not a war that they can win, right? I mean, you've got Amazon. If you've got Prime, you've got all that music already. You've got Spotify. Spotify's far, far better. And most of the content, the samples at this rate that they're using aren't as good as Spotify. And then you've got Pandora, at least in the United States, you've got Pandora, which can play anything, so and those services work extremely well, getting me to go for Apple Music and a voice plan. Like you said, I'm going to think, I don't need cell service. I've got cell service. What do you want from me?
Yeah.
It's just
so just kind of changing gears for a second, John, I know that your life changed when they announced that the HomePod minis would come out in different colors. I'm sure you dropped everything you did to place your order. Right.
Actually, even though, because it's not appointment viewing anymore, it's that's the trouble with doing these virtually and doing them too often is they've gotten lackadaisical, as you pointed out about this. So Apple could do a better job with these kind of releases. And actually, I like the colors. I don't actually, like the service compared to, who's sitting in the room next to me, and I can't mention her name, but I actually like the colors. I think they look kind of cool. It's just the service that's not up to snuff, still. So,
well, I'm going to bring in the very late Stewart Wolpin. And Stewart,
hello.
We're going to dock your check, Stewart, just because
the new watch made me late.
You're I can't see that. Is it your Apple Watch? Are you blaming this on Apple?
The new Series 7 watch made me late. It's all the technology's fault.
Oh wow! See, okay.
Like this, sorry.
Tim, please take note of that criticism of the Apple Watch Series 7. Stewart, I mean, just really quickly, what were your thoughts on the voice plan, music plan, and those new multicolored HomePod minis? Any feedback?
Well, if they were going to do colors, I would have expected there to be a lot more colors. What, they had 3 colors?
Right.
I was
got blue and orange though. The Mets fan, you got to be happy about that.
Yeah.
Say again.
They have blue and orange, so aren't you set?
Well, that would be very nice, but that means I have to buy 2 of them. Maybe
the whole idea.
The thing would have been that they could have made skins for them, which would have opened up a whole third-party revenue source for them, for people to just make colored skins for them, like they make wristbands. A lot of companies make wristbands for the watch. So maybe instead of them making a specific color, they could have sent out specifications, and a lot of third-party accessory makers simply could have made little skin bags that you could put your HomePods into.
Yeah, the challenge with that, though, and I know a little bit about that, is that the skins on those speakers have acoustic properties to it. And now Apple could go out of its way and say, hey, here's the standard that you have to build these skins to. But I think that they're so, in many ways, concerned about the audio experience. They don't want people goofing around with skins that may impact the audio experience. But it's a good idea, interesting idea,
And what was the other question?
Apple Music.
Apple Music. I was a little surprised at that. I'm watching him make that presentation that you can activate your music by Siri, and I'm going, can't I do that already? So he didn't stress that it was a lower cost service until the end of the presentation, and all through the presentation, I'm thinking I can already control my music through Siri. So I was a little confused at what it was until the end of the presentation, and they said it was like $4.95 a month instead of like $9.95 a month or whatever it is.
Right.
Well, this was the Steve and Edie Gourmet part of the announcement, and I was just making that very, very humorous reference. You got to read my Forbes piece, Stewart, to get all that humor.
Okay.
So anyway, let's talk about the new AirPods 3s. To me, this is going to be a big deal. And from a business perspective, Apple does. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the numbers, but their annual business, if the numbers are to believe, and these are reported by Apple, they do $12 billion in revenue with AirPods. Wow. That's a significant business. Right. And obviously they haven't refreshed these for a couple of years. This category is actually fairly competitive. There's a lot of players out there with interesting devices. And again, part of the problem with assessing any type of audio device is that you got to go into a store and listen to them and actually play and read the reviews when they come out to see if they're up to stuff. But John, let me start with you. What was your reaction? Are you going to go out and buy a pair?
Probably not, but I'll test a pair. I think those numbers are probably up there because people keep losing them, right? But supposedly,
when they lose one,
right? Supposedly, the new contour on the AirPods 3 is supposed to fit better in your ear. They're a little shorter. They don't look quite as, you're a member of the hive, but it's still, they're still the hard. And if you want to get the ones that everybody else makes, that everybody else sells, that have silicone tips, you've got to go up to the $250 set. So, I'm, if you're in that group, they're a decent price range, but they've got an awful lot of competition from Jabra and Anchor and people that make some really excellent true wireless earpieces that fit very well and come with lots of flexible parts. So, they're sort of playing catch up, but if you're part of the ecosystem, still could be an improvement.
Well, Rob, what was really interesting, the Wall Street, I think it was the Journal, did a story last week or the week before that there were rumors that the AirPods might be repositioned to become a kind of a smart hearing aid kind of device, repositioned for that kind of category, similar to Ergo, what Ergo's been doing in that space.
They didn't know that. The FDA said that they have finally published the rule that will allow over-the-counter sales of hearing aids, which is something that I didn't realize it had taken quite this long. This has been like a 6-year process from this advisory committee under Obama, suggesting that, yes, maybe you don't need to have this detailed exam just to get a hearing aid to pop into your ear.
Right.
Finally, a law sponsored by Senator Elizabeth Warren, signed into law by President Trump. And now, 4 years after that, we finally have the rule published. The comment period on that closes January 18th. So hopefully in the next few months, people will be able to buy hearing aids for much less. And I'm sure Amazon is going to sell a ton of them on its site.
Oh, yeah. No, they're going to move a few. That's exactly my thought. But Stewart, were you impressed with the AirPods? Are you an AirPod guy?
I have never been impressed with the AirPods. Every time, and I have all the 3 previous generations, including the Pros. And every time I wear them, there isn't a time that I'm wearing them that I don't accidentally knock one out. And the Pros at least do have the tips on them, but the other ones do not. And no matter how contoured that Apple makes these, one size does not fit all. I have never been able to maintain a solid noise isolating seal with them. And the fact that other true wireless makers give you at least 3 sizes of EarPods, a lot of them offer 5. I do reviews of these all the time, and even the ones that give you tips don't always fit because they're not designed the right way. So for Apple to continually sell these, and I understand that and I know that they do offer a degree of additional functionality that non-Apple True Wireless buds provide, but I do not find that those extra features compensate for the fact that I'm continually accidentally knocking one or both out of my ears, especially when you're taking masks on and off.
Right.
So I just don't understand that Apple is doing this. To go with the Pro, these tips can't cost that much, and they are a great improvement in not only in fit, but in noise isolating seal. So the noise cancellation at least can do something, because the noise isolating seal is 90% of the battle for noise canceling technology.
Right.
So, and on the hearing aid side, I know that Apple is working on them. There was a technology introduced at CES 2020, these many months ago, called Bluetooth LE audio, which is a hearing aid company designed technology that is designed to merge the over-the-counter hearing aid with true wireless buds. You mentioned the Eargo. I'm wearing the Eargos even as we speak. I've been testing them. They are not Bluetooth. Right. So a lot of these over-counter solutions do not have Bluetooth. They're simply hearing assisting devices. And whatever the FDA rules of them are, I've tested any number of these things, and some are much better than others. But I think next year may be the change. Now that the FDA has finally published the rules, I think that may have been holding up the release of Bluetooth Audio LE enabled buds that would provide both really good sounding music as well as hearing aid capability. So I've spoken to a number of companies, and I know that at least one of them, one major headphone maker, is working on a pair of Bluetooth Audio LE, but I've been sworn to silence.
Are the Ergos you have, are those are the new ones, the 5s?
Yeah, the 5s.
Yeah, I mean, I know Ergo quite well, and they actually they're really wonderful. Actually,
yes,
and they do what they say they're going to do. And now the trick is, though, they're expensive. They're not. They're
$2,500.
Yeah,
so they are a little pricey. The app needs a lot of work. I've been back and forth with them on how confusing the app and the functionality of them is through the app. In fact, I have another call with them scheduled for this coming Monday, simply because there's so many problems with the app, and they freely admit that it's a work in progress. So we'll see.
But remember that Zvox has been selling this stuff online for a very, very, very long time.
Well,
so you can get hearing aids.
There are a lot of
$500.
There are a lot of over-the-counter buds. A lot of them are the traditional style and has the receiver and battery pack in the back. They use replaceable batteries. The thing that the Eargo 5s have, and all the Eargos, in fact, is that they're rechargeable, which makes them far more convenient to use. And they don't have that thing in the back, so they're nearly invisible. So nobody really knows unless you put your ear up to the camera that you're actually wearing them.
Never would have guessed.
Right. But they just technology wise, with the Sennheiser sale and all that stuff, you're going to have a lot of companies out with these earbuds, and there's no real justification for that price. I mean, the technology just isn't. You have miniaturization has already occurred. They fit in your ear. They have triple microphones already. They have the software. It's going to be a $500 product, down from $7,000.
Yeah. Once a lot of more of these come out on the market, I think you'll see the price drop precipitously on all of these.
Yep.
Yeah, it's going to be gone.
Well, let's go to the Frank Sinatra portion of the announcement. Use that analogy. Use the old Blue Eyes presentation. That was the the new announcements of new Apple Silicon. Now, I think most industry pundits were expecting them to do at least one new iteration, and they surprised a lot of people by coming out with two flavors, the Pro and the Max. And I got to tell you, looking at it from a technical standpoint, I'm a content developer because I do a lot of video work and a lot of other stuff, so I kind of gravitate toward the Max, and I'm. It makes me a bit jealous that I bought a Mac Mini last December, and if you configure if you configure the M1 Max with a MacBook Pro with 64 gigs and 2 terabytes, you're talking about $4,000. So it's not a cheap notebook, a cheap laptop. But anyway, let me start with Rob. Rob, what were your thoughts? Were you surprised by these new iterations, because they really are going hardcore at Intel and AMD?
Surprised that the starting price is so steep, 2,000 and up, and then it goes all the way. I think if you actually check every box to get every possible upgrade, you're looking at $6,000 for a laptop, which you better take really good care of it. Right. But there are people who live in Final Cut Pro and need that kind of processing power. I am not one. I happened to buy this M1 Mac Mini a month ago, actually 6 weeks ago, and I was delighted that Apple did not introduce a new one or even cut the price of the old one. So for once, I escaped the usual fate of an Apple customer, which is to buy something and then a month later they introduce a better something at a cheaper price.
You bring up a good question, because that was my fear as well. My fear was as well that they were going to announce, Pro and Max versions of the Mac Mini, and they didn't do that. And I'm wondering, did they not do that purely because they're coming out with more silicon? Are they going to come out with a more, because the advantage you have with the Mac Mini form factors, you've got more room, the thermals are better, and presumably you could probably run even faster silicon there. So I don't know. If you're talking about addressing the desktop professional market, what they really got to do is the Mac Pro, which is literally the elephant, the aging retirement age elephant in the room, where that was supposed to be their answer to people who needed maximum processing power, and it's out of date, it's obsolete. Right. It shouldn't even be on sale anymore. So that's the big hole they got to fill. Yes, there's an Intel-based Mac Mini, but I don't think they're selling that many of those at this point, since it is a fairly old design. But the Mac Pro looks worse because it's fairly old and really expensive still. Stewart, your thoughts?
Well, I was a little surprised and somewhat delighted, not necessarily by the equipment, by the fact that Apple managed to keep this under wraps so well. Yeah. I don't think I saw a single analyst who predicted, that there would be two of these new chips, and everybody kept calling it the M1X. I don't think anybody, I was very surprised that it didn't leak. That was interesting from a reporting point of view.
And so let me just stop you for a second. That in their headquarters in Cupertino, when they pull something like that off, where there were no previous rumors, they're all giving the thumbs up to themselves. Hey, we kept this thing under wraps. But you're right. Yeah. So
I was very impressive. Usually they're not very good at that. Usually something leaks. Even if there were going to be two of them, you would have expected something about, two of them, what they would have been called is something else. But the fact that this was, I think, took everybody by surprise, I thought was rather impressive. Sure. Now, I will admit that I bought one already, primarily because my 2015 MacBook Pro has been coughing up blood for about a year. And so I was stalling, did not want to buy an Intel version. I wanted the latest, so I don't have to buy another one for another 5 or 6 years.
What did you get?
I got the Pro. I didn't get the Max because I don't do any video or graphic stuff, so I didn't need all of that muscle. My interest was purely maintaining the ecosystem, and I just added on memory and both system and storage memory to boost those a little bit, so I could use it as a primary if necessary. The question I have, which I want to find out, is maybe I can use it as my main CPU and just buy a monitor when I'm using, when I need a bigger screen. I'm assuming that's the case since it comes with an HDMI jack. Which I thought
should be able to use it with screen closed, if I remember.
Yeah, no, you can. The answer is yes, because I do it myself with my Intel MacBook Pro that I ordered a year ago. Back last December. So, but the question really is that will there be a performance difference between a desktop version of this and a laptop version, it's probably going to be very close. I mean, yeah, you'll get better thermals in a desktop, like a Mac Mini form factor, but I don't think it's going to be demonstrative unless they, of course, come out with a brand new iteration of silicon.
Well, I've got a 2016 desktop at the moment, so if I could somehow turn the Pro that I'm getting into a new desktop simply by buying, a $500 monitor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
John, your closing comments on this topic.
Oh, I mean, the performance of the big thing for me was battery life. That they, if those numbers hold up, to get over 20 hours of battery life, that's a laptop I need. I think a lot of people would go for that. I mean, to Rob's point, it's very expensive, $2,000 for the 14-inch model. Entry level, that's pretty steep for a 14-inch laptop. But again, the video processing. If you're a Final Cut Pro user, notice they not a lot of talk about gaming. So if you're serious about real power in a laptop, those laptops are already out there in the Windows realm, and the Alienwares of the world are already out there for people like that. So it's kind of a niche-y thing in a way, but it is, again, the battery life. They were running numbers by us, 20 hours of video playback. That would be kind of astounding if they could actually match that. So we'll see when we get our hands on them.
I'll let you know the first week of November.
The only thing I'll close on this is that I ordered one literally 5 minutes after the event ended, and it took me 30 minutes to get the into the queue and through the ordering process. And I mean, the demand must be sky high,
Wow.
now. So that's true of all Apple announcements. All the Apple geeks are out there ordering the stuff. It doesn't matter what it is; they'll order it the minute after the event ends. But I think, I'll just say that I do think that they spent a lot of time, really almost kind of like a speed presentation going through these specs. And I think, and I mentioned that in my article, I think they almost did a disservice to people because, a lot of people who watch these announcement events are people who are not necessarily technical or technological experts. And a lot of these numbers are just is gibberish to them. And I think they were trying to speak to two different audiences. They're trying to convince people that, hey, our stuff is as good and by the way, much better than what we can get from Intel. We're vertically integrated. Our operating system is optimized, yada, yada, yada. But I think sometimes they speed through these presentations so quickly that they don't necessarily attach the real benefits to, hey, by the way, this is why you really want to have this type of horsepower. Even if you're not a professional content developer, there may be applications out there that this kind of performance comes in at. But again, pretty pricey at $4,000 and up for the right configuration. Let's close this out on the new MacBook Pro models. They kissed goodbye the Touch Bar. That I thought that was kind of interesting. And how they just didn't even mention that. It said, okay, it's gone. See ya. We had great hopes for it. And they're adding a lot more ports. That's really where the bells, I think people are so pleased with that at least some dongles will go away. But let me start with you, Rob. What did you think about from a hardware architecture standpoint, what did you think of the new MacBook Pros?
There's so many tweets, comments, emails I've seen from people who have been buying Mac laptops for work and have been not happy with that experience over the last 5 years. And now Apple has gotten rid of the touch bar, somebody at Apple decided we don't need to have a touch interface. We'll just have this little ribbon of a touch screen you can customize with shortcuts. And apparently, even a lot of Apple's own software didn't make great use of it. They put an SD card slot back into it so you can just eject the card from your camera, pop it into the computer, crazy thought, an HDMI port so you can just plug it into any standard HDMI cable. Mm-hmm. And it would have been nice for Tim Cook to say, apologize for the old MacBook Pro design, say regrets, I've had a few, but
that's a great
it's great that they recognize that. Now maybe they can get around to putting a headphone jack back in the iPad Mini. No, I'm not letting that go.
Right.
But there is a headphone jack in this new MacBook Pro.
Right. Yeah.
That's worth $6,000 right there.
Yeah. Well, it's a really nice headphone jack. It's the Cadillac of headphone jacks.
Right.
John, your thoughts on the new MacBook Pros?
I think they did. They checked off all the boxes for this. I mean, except for the price, but aside from that, I definitely. I mean, for me, also storage is big. I mean,
Thanks.
8 terabytes is kind of the minimum now. So if you're really doing a lot of work, you're going to have an extra external storage device. It just goes with the territory these days. So but it definitely helps getting it. The 8 terabytes. But as Rob said, I think in the 16-inch, once you do the Max processor and everything and the software, you're at almost $6,500. I think I tallied it up. But if you're a video editor, film editor working in that area, invaluable to have this kind of power in a portable computer.
Stewart, the question I have for you as we kind of close this out is, what does it say when a company like Apple introduces a highly touted feature like the Touch Bar? I mean, they got to remember that's been a big deal for them. It's been around for quite a bit, and even Apple, the great Apple, could not convince people to migrate to this new feature. What does that say? That Apple is not, invincible when it comes to convincing people?
This is the company that came out with the Newton. So, I mean, asking for infallibility, I think, is silly. And quite frankly, I think we're going to have the same discussion next year on the demise of the Lightning jack. I really think that the iPhone 14 is going to go to USB-C only because they're just going to have to. It just makes no sense. So I think that, just like the 30-pin connector on the old that came out with the iPod and things. I mean, Apple has gone through these iterations. Listen, and they're not the only company that has done this. Sony kept trying to establish, formats on its own, which it finally killed them. And I think Apple is faster to recognize when it's got a dead horse in the bed than other companies. I'm happy that they experiment with different ideas. I think every company ought to do that. And sometimes it takes them a little longer than necessary to realize that maybe that wasn't such a great idea. But that's the world of technology. That's certainly technology history. I don't think Apple is much different from any other very, very large company, whether it be Samsung or Sony or LG or any of these companies who experiment with form factors, with different technologies, almost always concentrating on the mistake is almost always we do it because we can, not because we should.
Right.
And it's just a trap that every technology company falls into at one time or another.
But there was a hint. It's called try a touch screen. Try the touch screen.
Well, as somebody who's been using Apple products, I don't want a touch screen on my laptop. That's just me, and I'm assuming that I'm not alone since they're not doing it.
Yeah.
I think the younger generation are all about touch screens. Everything is a touch screen, so that seems like just being stubborn to me.
Yeah. Well, I think they would argue, Apple would argue, because their sales, even though the Mac OS is still only about 10 or 15% up. Call it MacBook share is only about 15% of the market. I mean, but it has climbed pretty substantially over the last year or so. They would, I think, Apple would say, hey, listen, you know what, we don't think we need a touchscreen to enable. It's not going to enable a larger part of the market. And by the way, that also burdens the product, with additional costs. That's probably less of a concern because of their margin.
Apple additional costs. Tell me more.
I'm sure there's a CFO at Apple that does care always about every 10th of a point of margin. But I also think that the fact of the matter is, I think until they're convinced that there'll be usability advantages and people will be able to do, and keep in mind, they have iOS and iPad OS. I mean, you want a touch interface?
You want a touch screen, get an iPad.
Yeah, and again, it's the age-old argument. Can you merge Mac OS and iOS/iPad OS together and still have a non-compromising experience? And I think Apple would say no if you merge them completely together. But
I'd like to keep my screen clean.
Yeah. So anyway, listen, and Stewart, we're going to dock you next time you don't show up on the podcast. So just be warned about that. But guys, thank you for taking the time to join me for today's podcast. For our viewing and listening audience, please make sure that you hit the like and subscribe buttons at the end of today's podcast. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Mark Vena, Tech Guy. And until next time, have a great weekend. And thanks, gents.